Tesla now worth less than before CEO Elon Musk's 420 tweet. That's when he said he was considering taking the company private at 420. The stock, you see, down just fractionally today after losing some yesterday as well. This, as the company's board plans to meet next week to discuss the possibility of going private and is likely to ask Musk to recuse himself from that process. Joining us now, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist Jim Stewart, whose column this week is focused on what's next for Tesla and the potential legal backlash of Musk's tweet. Jim, good to see you.
Good to be here.
We're chewing it over already. Probably a lot more to come on what the meaning of funding secured is, which was the phrase in Musk's tweet that has gotten so much attention. What are the responsibilities attached to a CEO saying something like that? What might it mean? What wiggle room is there?
Well, there are huge responsibilities when you're a CEO. I mean, this is a case study in why we have securities laws. I mean, look at the stock action. Billions of dollars have been made and lost, set in motion by this tweet. And, you know, a lot of stockholders in Tesla are not sophisticated investors. They're fans of Musk, they're fans of the car. I know a lot of people who are, just regular individuals who own that stock. So a CEO cannot, first of all, issue information if it isn't disseminated very, very widely. There's a question whether Twitter would qualify for that, but I think the general consensus, when you're talking about a $70 billion plus deal, no, Twitter alone is not enough. So that's number one. Number two, if you do say something, it cannot be misleading, incomplete, or worse, wrong, even false. I mean, everybody saw the way the stock shot up on that. So if this funding is not secured, that was a statement of fact. That wasn't saying, oh, I hope to get the funding, or I'm encouraged, that, it looks good. No, that was a fact. And if that turns out to be wrong, there are going to be serious consequences for that, and there should be.
You say if it's wrong, and that's where I think a lot of people have said,
I mean,
what does it mean?
The word secured is not binary, right? There are grades of security.
Yeah, everybody's going to be pulling out their dictionaries
Yes.
now. I mean, it's kind of like, what is the meaning of is or something like that. I mean, how can you parse this? But I think, again, if I'm sitting at the SEC, I'm going to look at this in the way the ordinary English language use of the word secured, funding secured, means I have it in hand. And if that doesn't turn out to be the case, I mean, maybe you can slither out of that. I mean, I'm sure lawyers will be working on this. But if it's not there, it strikes me as on its face misleading.
And so what penalties could he face?
Well, it depends. I mean, it could go any way from, filing, failure to file an 8K, which is a normal way to disseminate information like this, to misstatement, to if they could prove that, his goal was to move the stock price up and punish short sellers, we're starting to get pretty close to the fraud line. Now, that's very difficult to prove, and I'm not saying that that's what it was all about. But I think that also goes to the point, the company needs to get out there and explain this. They need to file with the SEC and tell the world not only what they're planning to do, but what has gone on in the last week to put this into some kind of context.
What do you make of reports that the SEC's making inquiries into not just the tweet, but a lot of their public statements?
Well, I applaud that. They wouldn't be doing their job if they weren't asking questions about that. So I'm not surprised. What I am continually surprised about is how flat-footed the board seems and the company itself seems. I mean, they went hours after this thing went out without any kind of response. They're telling us, well, I guess they're not telling us, CNBC reported that they're going to talk to advisors and lawyers next week. Well, now, wait a minute. They should have been doing that long before the tweet ever went out. Frankly, I'm dumbfounded. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, a subset of the board did come out the next morning and say, well, last week, Elon came to us with this idea, and then now they're building a process seemingly around that. But it's interesting because you mentioned, he has a record, obviously, publicly, of trying to kind of target short sellers and perhaps advocate for his own stock. And also, it would seem to complicate any process of getting anchor investors to buy this company out and take it private if you have these questions around his behavior and his future.
Well, yeah, I find it very puzzling and contradictory that Musk himself has been complaining about the stock going up and down. Well, why is the stock going up and down? A lot of time, it's because of him and things that he said. I mean, in the last earnings conference, he had to apologize for remarks that he made earlier. What is going on here? Is he going to apologize again? I mean, this is starting to be something of a pattern that I think is troubling. And, I've been looking into the question of, brilliant entrepreneurs, and let's give him his due. He has a phenomenal track record here, and I love the cars. But people like that need to be surrounded by other people who make sure they stay within the boundaries of the law. You need strong lawyers, you need outside counsel, you need a strong board, and that's what I'm looking around and saying, where are they?
We've made the point several times, worth making again, as you talk about his disdain for the public markets. The public markets actually treat him very well when you look at the multiple that the stock has, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It's really incredible. Do you doubt, though, that there could be a group of investors out there who are so enamored with him, they would strike the kind of deal that he would be looking for, right? With generous financing terms, because they have such a belief in the long term that eventually they're going to make a ton of money.
Anything's possible, and
I mean, if anything, this guy.
He's got a great story. It wouldn't shock me that there are people like that, but if I was Musk, I would want to think carefully about who they are and how long-term they are and how enamored they are. I mean, once you are substituting the public market for one or maybe a handful of extremely powerful, sophisticated, venture capitalists or investors, you're bringing someone under the tent with a tremendous amount of influence and control over what happens. And is that really better than having public markets? I mean, look how Amazon has traded over the years. The public market has been Amazon's best friend. If you've got a great story and a vision and you can articulate it, I don't know why you wouldn't want to be in the public.
Well, the irony there is arguably you could have found these other entrepreneurs like Musk, like Jobs, like Bezos or whoever, who maybe similarly disdained the kind of short-term focus of investors, but they didn't need capital all the time.
Right.
Musk needs the capital on an ongoing basis.
Right, and again, putting aside the vision and the story, which everybody loves, this is an odd time to be thinking of going private when you're still burning through cash. He projected a profit, which again, I kind of raised an eyebrow over that on the last earnings call.
Yep.
But if he hasn't yet produced it, and in this cash flow situation, this is not a typical situation. Certainly not for a buyout. Maybe for a deep-pocketed venture fund or something, but. I don't know. I find it very puzzling. I'm not at all convinced the board will look at this and decide it makes a lot of sense.
So it sounds like directionally you're leaning into thinking that this an LBO does not happen at Tesla.
I'm a little skeptical,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Certainly not leveraged. I mean, it would have to be some kind of willing donor with the belief that down the road their equity that they would get, I presume, in return,
Right.
would really pay off.
People are throwing out, sovereign wealth funds and some of those things. Maybe that would be an avenue if they're really prepared to invest in long term and with a very, very high risk. But we're talking about a big number.
The biggest ever venture capital deal.
This is huge. I mean, Saudi Arabia may have moved into 4-point-something%, but that's a small fraction of what this thing would cost if they're really going to go private.